Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel, and it's Tuesday. Hope everybody had a great start to the week. I have. It's nice to get back into the flow of things. You know that my parents were here for 3 months, and there were some things that went on while they were here with my mother's health. And I've got back in here, and it's kind of taken me almost a week and a half to kind of get back to way I was doing things before they got here. So going back to October, November, December, getting back in the groove of managing both, doing the show, which takes me probably between doing the show and research and preparing it, probably about 3 hours a day. And then all of the other things that I do with trying to put together my writing and the Twitter work that I do. And there's some other writing stuff that I'm working on right now that really has nothing to do with actually writing a book. So there's, that's how weird it can be sometimes. So only within the last few days have I begun to kind of feel like regular Ed life, regular Ed Dentzel life. So hopefully the next few months can be very productive for me on a variety of fronts. I woke up last night with like the hugest pain, not right on my spine, but there was a muscle like right to the right of my upper spine, like kind of like, when you move your shoulder and you can feel part of your back move, this, what is that, the scapula or something like that? I had a muscle in there that was so tight. I don't know why it was, but I had to get out of bed and I had to stretch that thing out for like 15 minutes. I don't know what went on there, but it was it was painful, and I took an Advil actually after it. So that was kind of weird. I guess those are the perils of getting old. Maybe young people have that happen to them as well. Never happened to me like that before. It was like a toothache in your back, except like 10 times that, because your toothache's just this little tiny little pain, whereas this thing must have been, I'm gonna say like 4 inches by 4 inches area that was just throbbing, and then just stretching it out just went away. Weird, just weird. I don't know what goes on while I sleep. Sometimes, I'm fascinated with dreams and sleeping. I love to sleep. And maybe that's the reason I'm a big fan of Carl Jung, who was a psychiatrist who got into the analysis of dreams. And actually I have a book written down, the idea for it having to do with dreams. Not something like Inception. No, very real world having to do with the analysis of dreams. Maybe one of these days I'll get around to writing it. But wonder what would happen if you film yourself sleeping. Maybe if I filmed myself sleeping, I could find out why my back was so tight last night. Maybe some dream that I can't remember now that really affected me in some way. I just don't know. It's kind of weird. So let's get to the show. Real quick, I saw there was this story of this woman, mother of 3 in the Seattle area, who met some guy online. They're supposed to go to a baseball game. I'm not sure if this was their first date, their third date. I don't know. But she ended up dead. This guy ended up killing her, hacking her into pieces, but they caught him. I didn't exactly cover up his crime very well. I'm going to venture to say, being that I have a lot of experience, at least as an amateur in this area, regarding men who murder women in unsolved cases, I'm going to venture that this isn't this guy's first murder. It has turned up that he does have a prior record. But this once again reestablishes my support for women being armed. There is not a woman in this country who shouldn't read that story and figure, hey, you know what? I think I need to own a gun. That's exactly what comes to my mind, and you know how my attitude towards guns has gotten a little bit more vigilant, and owning it has gotten a little bit more important in my life, and I'm a guy. But if there are women, it amazes me, and I know it goes on because we have millions of liberal women in this country who would read that story about this innocent woman, mother of 3, and it never occurred to them that that woman should have armed herself. Probably that's the biggest problem we have with getting through to more people, especially women, about being armed. There are just too many people who read stories like that, and it never occurs to them that that might be a solution to this problem. Never occurs to them for a second. Of course, the big problem regarding all of this is that liberals in this country are led, regular liberals are led by well-known liberals who are allegedly anti-gun, and they put up anti-gun legislation, but they themselves, they love guns. Their bodyguards, of course, have many guns. In fact, I'd venture to say that some of these politicians who are so anti-gun, I'm going to guess that they do have guns. It's just off the books. That wouldn't surprise me at all. The problem is too many regular liberals take these well-known liberals at their word. So what do these average liberals do? They don't get guns either, especially women, and they set themselves up for what happened, for example, to this woman. I think this happened this past weekend. That's the real tragedy of all of that. And that's why I've decided in my life, for all of the women that I know, that I think that I can talk to about this particular, subject, I tell them, you should get a gun. Now, granted, depends on the state, depends what the laws are. Some of these women, I know them well, but I don't know if they have a record or something. If you have a felony, you can't buy a gun. You might be able to get one on the street. And I would say that if a woman has a felony, and if it's not a violent felony, then she should be able to get a gun. That's my attitude. If it was check kiting or something like that, some white-collar crime that's a felony, that's one thing. If it's, stabbing a guy or beating another woman up or something, then yeah, maybe this woman has anger issues and she shouldn't own a gun. Of course, I can understand that. But I really don't know that the women in my life that well. Would never ask them if they have a criminal record, everything. That would never occur to me. But I tell them. I've been a little bit of a preacher regarding guns the last 6 months. And what's interesting to me is some of these women are not conservative, but when I bring it up, it's funny, these women are very open-minded to it. Some of them don't have guns and haven't gotten a gun yet, but I wouldn't say they're opposed to it. I haven't gotten any, how dare you say that, guns kill people. So that makes me feel kind of good. So my heart goes out. This woman who got killed, she had 3 kids. It's just terrible. But I can't help but think if she had a little snub-nosed .38 revolver, something like that, and we'll find out eventually what happened. We'll eventually find out how the guy got to her. I don't know. Maybe surprised her, strangled her from behind, wherever the case may be. Seems to me maybe the woman was a little too trusting. And I'd say that for all of you women, single women out there, can't meet guys in real life, you go online. I necessarily don't have anything wrong with that. But you got to meet these men in public places at least 3 or 4 times. Do not allow them to come to your house. Don't give out any information like that. Keep your kids away from them for at least a decent amount of time. And when you go to meet this guy, have your concealed carry weapon, have your permit, and be prepared. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is now. That's just the way it is. But you sound like to me a little too trusting, but it's just bad. And it's happening every day, and it happens way too much. So let's move on to something else. I noticed out there, I've been talking about this for a while. It seems like a lot of people are now catching up to what I've been doing for months. And this goes back to probably November when I started talking to you seriously about how we as regular conservatives have been misled by those people who have made millions of dollars off of conservatives for decades. You know the names. Laura Ingraham, Rush Limbaugh, Shine Laura Ingraham, Ann Coulter, on and on and on. You could go on and on and on of conservatives who have made a lot of money and have become very famous, sold a lot of books, got a lot of readers, sold a lot of stuff, sold a lot of gold, sold a lot of magic beds, sold a lot of iced tea, sold a lot of reverse mortgages in the process of preaching conservatism. And I've told you that I figured out about 6 months ago that we've been misled. Was an original idea on my part. I had not read it anywhere else, but I'm not going to say that somebody else hadn't said that beforehand. But it's just become very, very obvious since last summer that this is the case. Well, what is now starting to pop up, and this is very interesting to me. Very, very interesting. And I love how the free market works in these cases. That you now see alternatives popping up to, for example, the Drudge Report. You see more and more. I've seen it at redstate.com, the other Red State. I've seen it at hotair.com. I've seen it at National Review. I've seen it at ricochet.com. I've seen it at the Weekly Standard. Many places where you see more and more conservatives commenting on how they don't go to Breitbart.com anymore. I haven't been to Breitbart.com in over a month. And if you've been listening to this show for a while, that I used to mention it all the time. I don't go there anymore. Same way with the Drudge Report. I don't go there anymore. And now I see, and I've been talking about this for a while. I've been having doubts about what was going on at those two sites in particular, being that they were so much a part of the show. Now I see other people are coming out of the woodwork and saying the same thing. People who don't do shows like that, just regular people, regular conservatives getting on, going to these sites, commenting, participating in the discussion. I'm seeing more and more of it. Just people are just fed up. People who are good conservatives who now realize that their goodwill is being used against them. Of years of going to those sites, of driving up the visitation to those sites, driving up the clicks, so the owner of those sites can charge more money for advertising. The owners of those sites can get famous, appear on shows, get paid to speak, on and on and on. And then what do those people then do? Turn around and trash their readers, their true conservative readers. And to use a Malcolm Gladwell term, not that he originated it, but he made it famous, I think we've gotten to a tipping point regarding this. Because now I see conservatives starting their own websites that are like those sites, but aren't in the tank for Donald Trump. One of those sites, I'll direct you to it, happy to do it, is called socialnewswatch.com. I think this site has been around for a while, kind of just somebody doing this, not maybe getting a lot of attention. But now I think the person or people who run this site are turning it into a little bit like the Drudge Report, which is what you call a news aggregator. There is no original news on the Drudge Report. There's only links to other sites. That's called a news aggregator. This is, I think, what Social News Watch is trying to do. I hope it's successful. I'm going to be going there every day. I'm going to use that site for this show for the foreseeable future. So you have these people suddenly not liking where they've been going. They're starting to do things on their own. I would like to say, and I'm just going to be honest here because that's what I do on this show. If I can't speak honestly about something, I don't talk about it. Unfortunately, I don't think that Red State Talk Radio, what you're listening to right now, 11 to midnight, Monday through Friday for the Dentzel domain. And of course, you know that you can find my show other places once it plays here. I don't know if Red State Talk Radio is going to be that way. It occurs to me in knowing what many of the other hosts talk about on their shows. To me, we have way too many pro-Trump people on this station. Way too many. And in that vein, I don't think that we will be part right now of that new wave of conservative sites that are, I think, popping up. All right, I think that too many people, once again, they do their shows. I do my show. I'm not trying to tell them how to do their shows, but as Red State Talk Radio as a whole, I think, WHOLE, I think that right now we're a little bit too caught up in the prior way of doing things instead of what seems to be a new way of doing things. See, I've told you what I think about all of this, is that when you, and it just doesn't have to do with Donald Trump. It could be many different things that could work their way into conservatism or the communication of conservatism, the publishing of conservatism, is that when you start tailoring your content to your audience and what you think they want. I know that we have to be that way, kind of. But when you're doing it and really you're trying to attract people that otherwise wouldn't listen to you, and as soon as you start talking about the particular topic, they're going to leave you. In the meantime, you're alienating people who have followed you and listened to you and read you for years. That is a dicey proposition. And I think that when this is all over, when Donald Trump loses, whether the nomination or in the general election, all those people who have supported him are going to go back to what they were doing. They're not going to listen to Rush. So he's going to lose those people. Just as an example, same way here at Red State Talk Radio. You're going to have these people tuning in that are just Rush people or Trump people, period. Meanwhile, alienating your hardcore audience, the reason you're supposed to exist in the first place, and so you doubly lose. You lose your hardcore support, and you lose those people who are just nothing but fly-by-night followers of a particular idea of a particular person. This is the reason, way back in the day, that I opposed Ron Paul so much. Cult of personality. Talk's a good game, kooky, but really in the end, just a cult of personality. And you saw, as soon as he kind of went off the political map, retired, however you want to put it, it's funny how you just don't see much of his people anymore. Where'd they go? Do you think a bunch of them are Trump supporters? I don't necessarily think so. Do you think a bunch of them are Ted Cruz supporters? Probably not. John Kasich supporters? Absolutely not. Where did they go? They just went back to what they're doing. They got caught up in the energy, the zealousness of one particular guy, and once he decided he didn't want to do anything more, they just moved on. They weren't as interested in somebody else taking up the mantle because they were there because of ideas. They were there because of a person, which is different. And I saw that for years. And I'm not patting myself necessarily on the back for that. It was pretty easy to see. It was pretty easy to see. When he went away, they went away. I don't know what those... I'm sure there still are some Ron Paul supporters out there who are still hoping maybe he jumps into this presidential race. And, of course, they're not going to go along with his son, Rand, because Rand is maybe a little too mainstream. Yes, he's a kooky on a couple ideas, but a little too mainstream for them. And plus, they really love Ron Paul only. It's not about the ideas. You always take a risk when you do that. And when you are when you are in the business of getting as many listeners and readers as possible, you have to be very, very careful about who if you alienate your base going after some fad. Because what happens is people wise up. There are a lot of industrious people out there who are going to take their matters into their own hands. If they can't find what they want to read, if they can't find what they want to listen to, then they're going to start creating it themselves. I know that feeling from my own life with writing. I write the books that I don't think other people are writing. I write books, and I try to make sure that their premises are somewhat unique. On top of that. Now, I haven't been totally successful at that. But I know the reason that I write, because there are still stories out there that need to be told that haven't been written yet. Just like back in the day when I was a filmmaker, what would I say? As long as bad movies are being made, I always have a shot, because that means there's always going to be room for good movies. And for anybody out there who's thinking about getting into any form of entertainment, as long as you hear there's bad music out there, horrible musicians, bad movies that tank, books that don't go anywhere, comedians that aren't funny, you're always going to have a shot. There's always going to be room for somebody who does something well. Well, unfortunately, over the last year, conservative leaders have opened that door up by being bad. Both morally and economically. They aren't offering the right kind of material anymore. And suddenly, when you do that, suddenly your regular person starts saying, well, you know what? I could do what they're doing. They're not doing a very good job. I could do, and suddenly people start tuning out and doing it on their own. I hope that doesn't occur with this show. As you know, I think I'm a hardcore conservative, have maybe a couple weird ideas here and there. But this is the exact reason that I'm a never Trump guy. It's the exact reason. Because I think that my core audience, and who I am at my core, is conservative. And Donald Trump is not conservative. And John Kasich is not conservative. Or any of these people, except for Ted Cruz, are conservative. There's the other part of this. And this goes to all those people who are going to vote for whoever the Republican nominee is just because they oppose Hillary or Bernie Sanders, is that I just don't want to get into a deep argument with those people. I guess that's the way we've been doing things, and some people just want to continue to do that. My only thing would be, I kind of feel like Ayn Rand when I say this, is that the lesser of two evils is still evil. See, was it in The Virtue of Selfishness? One of her nonfiction books. I'm sure I have it in my library. I have a wealth of Ayn Rand material lying around here, both fiction and nonfiction. Then one of those books, she talks about the black and white, what this and that, and the mixture of the two. When you mix those two, that you still have a little bit of evil in there. You still have a bunch of bad in there. Even part of it may be good. And what I would try to tell all of you is that when you are willing to accept the lesser of two evils, especially when you don't even have to pick, you do it on your own volition, then the powers that be have you. They have you physically and they have you mentally. When they've convinced you that it's okay to vote for the lesser of two evils. I want you to think long and hard about that. Because you should know, while you're making what you think is a very good decision, there are people who are taking the harder way out and doing things on their own because they don't want to have anything to do with it at all. They're going to be self-starters who are going to try to fight about your acceptance. They're going to try to fight your acceptance of the lesser of two evils. And I want to put my morality in a place where I'm fighting against the lesser of two evils. I'm fighting against the worst of two evils, and I'm fighting against the lesser of two evils. That's what I do. And you should be there as well. I'm not going to hit you too hard on it, but you should be thinking long and hard about that. Let's move on to something else. I was sitting here, and I know this is one of those situations where you might think that, being that I am a Ted Cruz supporter, I speak well of him, even though I haven't given him any money, not going to any of his events. I did vote for him in the primary here in Florida, but that's it. But he has come out yesterday talking about weed legalization. And I wrote a book about this. It's not currently, I've taken it off of Amazon.com because I'm in the process of re-editing it, rewriting a few parts of it. I think I can make it better. And plus, I'm going to try to use it to attract agents. But that entire book is about drugs. Doesn't seem like it because it's a science fiction novel. But it is a book about drugs. It's about the legalization and the things that happen on a distant planet. And I don't want to give too much more away than that. But I agree with Ted Cruz so much as he says that drugs should be a states' rights issue. Now, I think personally that the federal government should still enforce the drug laws. I think that the federal government has a role in keeping drugs out of this country. I believe that. But if states are going to do what they're going to do, I don't know what you can do to stop that. See, the problem that has popped up really regarding all of this, and this is the reason I think that eventually down the road, these drug laws may start going the opposite direction, is people are going to find out that what we anti-drug people have been saying for years is true. That it's just not, legalization seems like it makes sense, but in the end, it causes more societal ills than keeping this stuff illegal. But it's obvious to me, but it's not obvious to a lot of people in the United States. One, because they want to do drugs. Two, because there are people who don't do drugs who I think have been duped by those people who market the legalization of marijuana. Once again, you've heard me talk about this before, about weed can cure this, and it can cure that, and it can fix this, it can fix this. Suddenly, it's the greatest miracle product in the history of the world. Now, do you think that's true, or do you think that there's some marketing going on? And I've told you that all this is people who want drugs legalized just so they don't have to look over their shoulder when they start doing their drugs. That's it. It has nothing to do with healing anybody. They don't. As soon as it becomes legal, they don't give a damn. Even if it were true. So some people, I think, just need to see in real life what some of us already know is proven in theory. And I think that's what Ted Cruz is trying to say here. I want to continue to talk about this after the break. You're listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
Red State Talk Radio. Lock it in and rip the knob off.
I know you're watching, so pay attention. You hate my freedom, my religion, and my country. You hate me for speaking my mind. You try to control me with violence and intimidation. You think you can muzzle me with fear? Don't ever confuse me for my politicians or my media. I am an American, free-born and free-bred, and I will call you out for who you are. An Islamic extremist who would kill me for my beliefs. You don't intimidate me. My freedom is more powerful than anything you can possibly do, and I will never, never surrender my rights to your terror. I will say what I think, worship according to my beliefs, and raise my children how I see fit, and I defend it all with the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. I cower to no one, because I am the National Rifle Association of America, and I am freedom's safest place.
This is Donna Fiducia. For 26 years, I was a member of the mainstream media, most recently as an anchor at the Fox News Channel. Ladies and gentlemen, the mainstream media has failed you miserably. Red State Talk Radio will not fail you. Tune into Red State Talk Radio at redstatetalkradio.com, the dominant force in conservative Internet talk radio.
I lost my brother Frank in the Battle of Iwo Jima.
He served on 4 combat tours.
In Vietnam,
in Iraq,
Afghanistan.
There's a life that was lost behind that pin.
I put it on for my wife.
For my husband.
My brother.
My dad.
My son.
We wear it because we honor those that we lost.
To learn more about the stories behind the Gold Star Pins, visit goldstarpins.org.
This is Jeff Carlisi from the Band 38 Special. You're listening to Red State Talk Radio. Lock it in and rip the knob off.
Back at the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I want to continue to talk about Ted Cruz and his attitude towards the legalization of weed in states, if those states, choose to do that. See, I think, continuing on what I said right at the end of the last half hour, is that I think in the end that drug legalization people, and more in particular weed legalization people, and that's what we're talking about here specifically, I think that they are the ones who will be ultimately the people who cost themselves the most. We as anti-drug people can go on and on and on about the dangers of drugs, how they ruin society, how they shouldn't be legal, how legalization of a poison like that says something about a civilization, when you just let the free flow of something that is nothing but a poison, especially to a person's brain, just flow through society. We believe that there are huge societal costs to be incurred because of that. And I think that we win a lot of arguments that way, but in the end, I think that it's going to be people who want it legal who are going to do the most damage to their own cause. You know why? because they can't help being themselves. And I think what I mean by that is you can already see that, for example, in the states around Colorado. To the east is Kansas, to the north is Wyoming, to the west is Utah, to the south is New Mexico, Arizona. That those states are not weed states. Weed is still illegal there, but you have people going into Colorado, buying the stuff, then going back to these states and taking across state lines. And when that happens and those people get caught, it becomes a federal issue. It's a crime committed across state lines. And once a lot of people start hearing these stories, and keep in mind, most of these states have just gotten weed legalization just within the last couple years. And it's probably only people like myself who do a show on it and take an interest in it that know all of the ins and outs of all of this. But when this news starts getting out to more and more people, and it will the longer it goes, there will be, once again, talking about a tipping point regarding conservative media, but there will be a tipping point here where I think people will start to see that, well, these drug legalization people, they talk a good game, but then in practice, it just seems to be willy-nilly. They just want to sell the drugs and not have to worry about any of the ramifications of doing so. And in fact, if they ruin some other state and they say, well, hey, people are going to buy their drugs and take them back to these non-drug states, what can we do about it? That's going to start to rub people the wrong way. Because what they're selling is selling drugs, using drugs responsibly. Well, if you're breaking the law by taking them back to another state, that's not responsible, is it? And there's also, of course, the other point that I always try to make about this, and I say this in the nicest way possible because, being a disc golfer, and I haven't been out there for a while, but disc golf is a sport that tends to attract a lot of dudes, you know what I mean? The truth is, once your average American gets to know what your average drug weed legalization person is like, that's also going to turn the tide and cause more and more people to be anti-weed. They're also going to make them even more anti-weed legalization. Let's just put it that way. The people necessarily who want this legalized are not the most fine, upstanding citizens anyway. All right? They've already been breaking the laws for years. A lot of them have been selling the stuff under the table, collecting the cash, of course not putting on their taxes, so they know all about breaking the law. And that's who these people are. That's who these people are. This is the exact reason why I look at a state like Colorado and it says, well, really haven't gotten as much tax revenue as we thought we were going to get from legalizing weed. Well, maybe it's because that everybody that's now in the business isn't used to paying taxes. How about that? And they know how to get around it. Could it be that? Could it be that you were a little naive thinking that people who have been getting around paying taxes for the sale of weed were then suddenly going to go legit? But I think Ted Cruz is right in saying that this is going to be a state's issue, rights issue. He is not necessarily, I don't think he is necessarily for drug legalization, for weed legalization. But I think he feels like me that, sometimes people need to see this for themselves. And I don't want to hear it about alcohol and prohibition and everything. Two totally, totally different topics, as much as some people want to compare them. Two totally different topics. Once again, the point I always try to make regarding all of this. Do you want a weed grow house next door to you, or do you want a guy who likes making his own wine next door to you? Which one would you prefer? Of course, everybody's going to pick the guy who makes the wine. Why? Because they know that weed attracts a certain type of person that those people don't want pulling up next door. Can we just put it that way? There's a different kind of person that's involved in each, no matter if the stuff is legal or illegal. Do you want a meth house next door to you, or do you want a guy or a woman who has his own home brewery? Which one do you want? If alcohol and drugs are the same thing, then you should be indifferent about either. But we know people aren't. And dare I say it, for all of those hoity-toity people who want drug legalization, they want it until it moves in next to them. And then it's like, whoa, 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 hey, what are you doing here? Suddenly the zoning laws go up, and drug houses, drug manufacturers, grow houses, all of that stuff are suddenly segregated to a small part of town, so people can love it, but love it from like 20 miles away. And I think that's what we're going to find out with this. We as non-drug people, anti-drug people, have not been able to make people think what we want. Our arguments have not been strong enough. I think we've made the right point. It's just that some people just need to see it for themselves. And sometimes that's just the way it goes. And maybe them seeing that for themselves will make a more lasting impression that we don't go down this direction, for another 100 years. We try this again, where people die and then they need to be, the next generation needs to have it proven to them again. Maybe there's that. Of course, we have examples from other countries that have messed around with this as well, and it hasn't gone well for them either, but the United States, somehow we think that we're different. Same way with like socialized medicine. The rest of the world's trying socialized medicine. We know what happens. Nobody can get any cancer treatments. People die of heart attacks at a higher rate, on and on and on. And then here in the United States, I guess a bunch of people want to try it here too. What are you going to do? Let's move on to something else. We know about the attack on coal that has been going on, COAL, the natural resource, that has been going on for 10 years now? I think the Barack Obama administration has been pretty energetic about this. We know that he goes, well, it's just not we're going to drive them out of business. We're just going to get to the point where they can't make any money doing it. And because of this, a lot of these coal industry towns, I guess that would be mainly in the eastern part of the United States, have really begun to suffer. People moving away if they can afford to, and some of these towns going in a direction of becoming ghost towns. Well, now I saw this headline at foxnews.com, and I still do go to the Fox News site. I don't watch Fox News, but I go to the foxnews.com site. It's not quite as pro-Trump as I think Fox News, the channel, tends to be. In any case, there was an article about how that oil may be next. That's going to try to, with taxation regulation, that the United States federal government has driven coal out of business, trying to drive coal out of business. It's going to try that with the oil industry as well. When I see that, when I read that kind of story, and I know a lot of people, of course, get excited about that, mainly on the left, almost probably exclusively on the left in this country. Yes, coal and oil are both natural resources, natural products that come out of the earth. But other than that, and one is a solid and one's a liquid, but they are vastly different in the roles that they have played in the world in the last hundreds of years. And I don't expect that the war on oil is going to go quite the same it has on coal, because you got to say that the war on coal has gone pretty well for liberals, unfortunately. Sucks. The difference, I think, the reason they've been able to get away with going after the coal industry is because there are substitutes for coal, first of all. Second of all, coal is just itself. It's coal, or if you wait millions of years under pressure, coal becomes diamonds. The coal is just something that you burn, whether it's for mostly for electricity at coal-fired plants. But we know there are other ways of producing electricity these days. Of course, liberals hate nuclear energy and everything else. They want us to go back to windmills and just using the sun. Good luck with that. Oil is different. The thing is, oil can be changed into different products. Coal cannot. You're not going to take coal and then mess with it somehow, and it suddenly becomes, a part that's going to be attached to your car, for example. Whereas, what do you think plastics are? Plastics are nothing but solidified coal, or solidified oil. People forget that. I remember, I'm going to say 5 years ago, maybe more than that there was somebody who I used to work with who posted a video online, and I'm sure it's still on YouTube somewhere. I have not looked at it since then. Some singer, some independent singer, not somebody famous, but somebody put this clever thing together about how oil is bad and did this little song about all of it, oil, and we should be doing this and we should be doing that. And person up on a stage, it's what I remember. Some friend of mine on Facebook who I used to work with posted that, thought it was just the cleverest thing in the world. And I wrote back to this person, and this is back in the day when I used to confront some of my liberal friends online. I don't do that anymore. I told the person, what's the ironic thing about this entire video? This person did. Without oil, this video wouldn't even exist. There would be no microphone. That singer, those clothes he's wearing, those clothes wouldn't exist. The camera that was used to film this obviously has plastic parts on it. Where'd the plastic come from? Oil. Without oil, this person couldn't even make this video, but they're going to make a video making fun of oil. There is some sort of irony in that. See, I just wonder how many people get that deep into it. When they say, well, we could just use solar power. We can use the wind. Yeah, but then what are you going to make stuff with? If we're going to get totally off of coal, what are we going to make cars out of? Oh, we're going to get rid of cars. Okay, well, what are we going to make subways out of? What are we going to make subways? What are we going to make public transit? What are we going to make buses out of? All those plastic parts. Keep in mind, steel and iron, coal is used to make that stuff too, but there's natural resources. So we're going to go back to using steel all the time, and we're going to use coal to make steel, so we're going to go back to the coal industry. What are we going to do? Because when you start going through your house and talking about how we need to get away from oil, and oil's killing people, and oil's damaging the ozone layer and causing climate change one way or the other, either temperatures going up and temperatures going down. I don't know what liberals are exactly saying today, April 12, 2016. You go around your house and you start seeing all of the stuff that is made out of oil. If you took all that stuff out of your house, you would have virtually nothing. And there's nothing that can take oil's place. So getting back to the federal government wanting to have a war on oil, well, that's no different than having a war on plastic. How would you feel if the government said, you know what, we're going to have a war on plastic? What would you think about that? You'd think the federal government was crazy. But being that just say we're going to have a war on oil, that makes liberals feel so much better. Whereas we say we're going to have a war on plastic, they say, what? Well, they're the same thing. Same exact thing, just in a different form. That's why they could get away with coal, and I doubt they're going to be able to get away with an oil. I know they have. I know what has been done over the last 10 years about outlawing this place from being drilled for oil and this place, but it's funny that despite all of that, free enterprise, the free market system, private companies have found out ways to drill and drill and drill. And in fact, we have more oil now than we've ever had, and that's why the price of oil is, well, it's not as low as it used to be. Well, it's not down to $30 a barrel like it was 3 months ago, but it's still pretty low. I don't know which way it's going to go, depending on demand and supply and demand. We'll see if the Middle East cuts back on its oil production. We'll see. But we have more oil than ever, and they want to wage a war against it. But they can't say that it's a war on plastic. They can't say it's a war on household goods. They can't say it's a war on cars. They can't say that it's a war on all of this stuff that both conservatives and liberals like, because that's just going to turn off too many people. And those people who want a war on oil, they're just going to cross their fingers and hope, you know what, I hope these people don't find out that plastic, all plastic is hard oil. So I saw this story, and it's once again, it seems like coal, this kind of goes back to what I was saying about drugs. People try to compare alcohol and weed, alcohol and cocaine, alcohol and heroin, just because both of them can cause an addiction. Whereas in reality, all those products are vastly different, and alcohol needs to be treated because of the properties it has. Drugs need to be treated for the properties that they have. And they're vastly different when you get into the specifics of each. Likewise with coal and oil. Once again, your average person thinks, they're both just natural resources. What's the big deal? They both come out of the ground, both huge industries. They both provide energy all over the world. But you get down into the specifics of each, and this doesn't make, I feel horribly bad about what has happened to the coal industry. But these two products are not alike, and it matters. It matters. So don't try to put them into the same boat, despite what federal government is going to try to convince citizens of otherwise. One more thing before I go. It's funny. I mentioned at the beginning of the show about Twitter. It's funny how many people I follow, and I follow liberals on Twitter, and they suddenly think that I'm going to troll them or something. I just want to put this out for the record. I do not troll, and I do not respond to trolls. All right? I don't. You can try your best. You can try to humiliate me. You can make fun of my family. Whatever you want to do, I don't respond to you. In fact, I probably won't even block you. But I don't respond. It's just funny that way. However, I will tell you that one of the reasons I got my gun is because some of the threats that I've gotten on Twitter and elsewhere. Just want to be prepared. There, I'll leave you with that for today. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. You can go to edwarddentzel.com where you can find all of my old Red State Talk Radio shows. You can find them also at SoundCloud, Podomatic, Podbean, and YouTube. You can go to edwarddentzel.com/book where you can download the first chapter of my next novel called The Comebacks. You can email me at edwarddentzel@reagan.com. Twitter, Dentzel Domain, all one word. Facebook, LinkedIn. You can find me there. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.